Why did the explosion feel so close when it hadn't even touched her? The shockwave slammed through her chest like a hammer, rattling teeth and bones, forcing her down into the dirt beside the boy whose life was bleeding out faster than she could stop it. 50 meters away, and still she felt it. The world shook, yet her hands didn't. They never did, not when lives were balanced on the edge of seconds. Private Jackson's chest cavity was open beneath her fingers, shredded Kevlar useless, arterial spray poolsing in desperate bursts. 17, maybe 19 years old. A face still soft under the grime, the eyes of a kid who should have been in college, or still at home, rather than here in the mud with bullets shredding the air above him. "Stay with me, Jackson." Her voice cut through the ringing chaos, calm, steady, measured, like she had all the time in the world, though both of them knew she didn't. The ground shook again. Shouts, gunfire, the ripping growl of machine rounds slamming into concrete just inches from her head. But Maya Chin didn't look up, didn't flinch. Her whole world had narrowed to torn flesh, clamping arteries, stopping death with nothing but her hands, and the knowledge burned into her from years of seeing this exact moment before. "I need more gauze," she barked, and Corpsman Williams scrambled forward with trembling hands, another mortar round screaming overhead. Dirt rained down like ash, but Maya's voice didn't waver. Her fingers found what they needed: pressure, clamp, stitch, precision in hell. Jackson tried to speak. She leaned closer, blood flecking across her cheek as he whispered through trembling lips, "My mom." "You'll tell her yourself," Maya snapped, cutting him off before the boy could say goodbye. She wouldn't allow it, not here, not yet. Her hands moved like machines, but her chest carried a weight she would never show. Because every time she looked into the wide, terrified eyes of soldiers barely old enough to shave, she felt the echoes of every boy she hadn't been able to save. That guilt never left. It simply waited, somewhere quiet inside her. 3 minutes later, his breathing evened. The color returned. Blood loss slowed. She packed the wound, sealed what she could, and signaled for evacuation. When they lifted Jackson onto the stretcher, his weak hand latched onto her wrist. Tears ran down the dirt on his face as his lips shaped the word "thank you." Maya gave his hand a squeeze. Then she let go, because another scream was already cutting through the battlefield. That was the rhythm of her life. Save one, move on, try not to wonder which faces would stay in her nightmares tonight. But something gnawed at her even before the shooting quieted. She had tracked the mortar fire throughout the firefight, mapping angles, calculating arcs, and the pattern didn't sit right. The rounds weren't random. They had shifted mid-battle, repositioned onto the eastern ridge. She lifted her radio to warn the evacuation team. Too late. Sergeant Martinez's shadow fell across her. His face was grim, his tone grimmer. "Chin, pack it up. You've got new orders." She blinked, chest still heaving from adrenaline. "What kind of orders?" "The kind that come from way above my pay grade." Martinez shoved a sealed envelope into her bloody hands. "You're being attached to a SEAL team. Classified op. Wheels up in 6 hours. Maya didn't answer immediately. She just stared down at the envelope, at the blood smears she left across the word "secret." She'd been pulled from chaos before, always mid-battle, always mid-something that mattered. The army had a way of deciding for her when she'd done enough. But this felt different. Inside the envelope, coordinates, mission parameters, and not nearly enough detail. A rescue operation, deep inside hostile territory. High-value target extraction. Extraction window narrow. Operational security absolute. What stood out most wasn't what it said. It was what it didn't. No medevac instructions. No casualty estimates. No mention of why she was needed. The helicopters thumped low across the horizon, lifting the wounded away. The battlefield stilled. Only the wind remained, carrying with it the stink of cordite, iron, and blood. Maya slung her pack over one shoulder, the familiar weight settling against her ribs. And then, almost without thinking, she brushed the sidearm at her hip, checked the chamber. Muscle memory. The orders hadn't mentioned that Staff Sergeant Maya Chin held expert marksman ratings on every weapon system in the arsenal, that she had graduated top of her class in sniper school before she'd abandoned the long rifle for scalpels and chest seals. And maybe that was for the best. Some truths were better left unsaid. The briefing room at Forward Operating Base Sentinel felt like a lion's den. She pushed the heavy steel door open, the echo ringing into silence. 6 men looked up from the tactical table, conversation dead the moment she entered. Predators, every one of them. Their eyes ran over her like she was a puzzle piece that didn't belong. At the head of the table, Lieutenant Commander Jake leaned back in his chair. Steel gray eyes. A man built like a wall, voice built like an order. "You sure you're in the right room, Doc?" It wasn't hostile, not exactly, but it didn't need to be. The way the others smirked said it for him. Tank built like a mountain, arms thick enough to break men in half, snorted. "Maybe she's lost, looking for the aid station." Laughter rippled through the table. Maya set her medical pack down quietly, almost gently, as though the gesture itself was deliberate. Then she stepped forward and leaned across the table, eyes scanning the satellite imagery. "Operation Nightfall," she said evenly, her voice cutting the air with surgical precision. "Primary objective, extract CIA operative David from compound 47 kilometers northeast. Secondary objective, secure intelligence package regarding imminent attack on U.S. soil. Enemy strength, 20 to 30 combatants, mixed arms. Insertion by Helo LZ Bravo, approach on foot to avoid detection. Extraction window, 03 to 0500. Hard close regardless of mission status." The room went dead quiet. She straightened Met's stare. "Operative has less than 18 hours before relocation or execution. Weather, clear, minimal wind, optimal conditions." Her pause was deliberate. "Any questions?" Tank's grin faltered. Collins, the one with the knife, stopped fidgeting. Evan's jaw ticked just slightly. "How exactly did you know that?" His voice was even but hard. Maya tapped the sealed folder on the table. "I read the full brief, including the parts about chemical weapons intel." That landed like another explosion. Eyes shifted, skepticism bent into something else, respect, maybe, curiosity, definitely. "I don't do anything halfway, Commander," she added quietly. "If I'm responsible for keeping your team alive, I need every detail. Terrain dictates evacuation. Timeline dictates supply use. Chemical threat dictates medical prep. Everything matters." For the first time since she walked in, they stopped looking at her like an intruder. His face gave nothing away, but the weight in his silence felt different now. "Anything else you'd like to add, Staff Sergeant?" he asked at last. Maya gave the faintest trace of a smile. "Just that I look forward to working with your team." And in the silence that followed, the balance shifted. Not much, but just enough. Morning came hot and merciless. The firing range shimmered with heat mirages as the SEALs ran final weapons checks. Maya sat cross-legged near her supplies, methodically inspecting her trauma kits, organizing syringes, counting tourniquets, folding gauze. Every movement precise, ordered, measured. That's when Tank lumbered over, grinning like he already knew how the game would end. "Hey, Doc, we're about to do some target practice. Want to join? Might be good for you to learn which end of the rifle the bullets come out of." The others looked up, amusement, anticipation. Maya didn't glance up from her pack. "I've got gear to finish prepping." "Come on," Tank pressed, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "We'll start easy, 50 meters. Promise we won't laugh too hard when you miss." Collins elbowed Santos, snickers, even looked over, curious now. Maya exhaled, slow and calm. She set her supplies down, stood and brushed the dust from her knees. "What did you have in mind?" Tank's grin widened. "Standard comp, 10 rounds, 100 meters, iron sights only, loser buys drinks." Her answer was simple. "All right, but I'll need a rifle." The predator's smile sharpened. "Use mine." He handed her his backup M4, warm from the sun. "Zeroed for me, but don't worry." She checked the weapon with practiced ease, each movement smooth. No wasted energy. The team gathered, waiting for the show. Maya lay prone, the rifle fitting into her shoulder like an old memory, breathing cycle steady, focus absolute. 10 shots cracked out, sharp and controlled in less than 30 seconds. She stood, brushed herself off, handed the rifle back without a word. Tank lifted his binoculars and froze. Grabbed his own optics, his jaw clenched. On the target, not 10 bullet holes. One, a ragged single hole where every round had carved through the same point. Silence, the kind that hung heavier than explosions. "Impossible," Collins whispered. Tank's face had drained of color. "The rifle wasn't even zeroed for you." Maya gave him the same neutral look she had given the battlefield hours before. "Lucky shots." Then she turned, walked back to her medical kit and continued her work. Didn't move, didn't speak. He only watched her, mind racing, because luck wasn't what he'd just witnessed. And for the first time, the SEALs began to wonder if the medic standing among them was something else entirely. Why did her heart stay calm when the others gripped their rifles? The helicopter roared low through the darkness, its blades chopping the night into shards of noise and vibration. Maya sat wedged between Tank and Collins, her medical pack jammed between her knees. She could feel every tremor in her bones, the low hum of war about to ignite again. Night air blasted through the open door. The valley beneath was nothing but shadow and suggestion. They were supposed to drop in smooth, a routine insertion, just another hop over friendly territory before stepping into hell. But hell always came early. The first tracer cut across the sky like a comet, streaking past the nose of the Black Hawk. A split second later, the crack of small arms fire ripped through the night. "Incoming," the crew chief's voice cut through the intercom. The helicopter banked hard, throwing everyone sideways. The world tilted, ground rushing up in the open door. Maya dug her boots into the deck, bracing, her stomach lurching with the dive. The air filled with bullets, invisible until they snapped past, hot enough to feel against her skin. The door gunner opened fire, his M240 hammering into the night, muzzle flash strobing in violent bursts. And then one scream cut through it all. The gunner slumped forward, his weapon falling silent. Blood spread across his flight suit, dark and fast, gushing from his thigh, the femoral artery. Maya didn't hesitate. She unclipped her harness and lunged, hands locking to the side of the bird as it bucked and swayed. The wind tore at her hair, bullets snapping close enough to make the air hiss, but she was already at his side. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice snapped behind her. She didn't answer, not with words. Her answer was pressure, hands already pressed deep into the wound, feeling the arterial spray beating against her palms. The boy's eyes were wide, face pale in the green glow of night vision light. "Stay with me," she shouted, forcing her voice steady even as the helicopter dropped again. Her body swung dangerously near the open door, her safety line jerking taut. For a second, nothing kept her from the black void outside but a steel clip and the strength in her grip. Still, her hands never left the wound. "Doc, patch him when we land." Voice barely reached her over the chaos. She looked up, blood slick on her arms, hair whipping in her face, eyes sharp as steel. "He'll bleed out in 3 minutes if I wait. Your call, Commander. You want a patient or a body bag?" The challenge cut straight through him, froze, then nodded once. "Do it." That was all she needed. The bird banked again, tracers still carving the dark. But Maya's world shrank down to artery, clamp, pressure, bandage. Her hands didn't shake. She sutured inside a storm 200 feet above ground, bullets snapping past like angry wasps. His eyes fluttered, pain and shock dragging him under. "You're fine," she murmured, pressing the last bandage into place. "You're going home." The firing thinned. The Black Hawk clawed for altitude, leaving the storm behind. Only when the boy's vitals steadied did Maya notice her own heartbeat again. Controlled, measured, calm in chaos. She buckled back into her seat, arms painted in blood, chest heaving from exertion. Across from her, studied her like he was seeing something he couldn't yet name. She didn't meet his gaze. Instead, she wiped her hands on a rag as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But silence filled the cabin where disbelief should have been. The compound lay below them hours later, a fortress crouched in the valley. 3 stories of concrete, ringed by walls, sentries packing with rifles under faint moonlight. Every angle designed to kill anyone foolish enough to breach it. Maya lay prone beside on the ridge, binoculars steady. The night hummed with tension, the smell of dust and cordite still on her from the helicopter. 12 tangos outside, whispered. Probable crew served on the roof. RPG team second-floor balcony. Maya swept her optics. Each guard, each field of fire. Angles, overlaps, dead zones. The compound wasn't just a safe house. It was designed like a military installation hiding in plain sight. She almost moved on, until something in one window froze her. A child's bicycle, bright red, training wheels leaning against the glass. Her blood went cold. She swept another window, a stuffed teddy bear, another child's drawings taped to the pane. Her voice was tight when she whispered, "Commander, we have a problem." Turned, camouflage paint making his face almost invisible. "What kind?" "Third floor, look." She passed him her binoculars. He went still, first the bike, then the bear, then the drawings. "Shit," he breathed. "Children," Maya whispered. "Families maybe, could be hostages, could be shields, but they're there." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of it hung heavier than any weapon. Finally, his voice cut the silence. Low, controlled. "All stations, civilians in target building, including children, confirm, repeat, civilians present." Acknowledgements crackled back, but every man's tone had shifted, because civilians didn't just complicate things, they changed everything. Maya exhaled slowly, the moral arithmetic already churning. This isn't just a rescue op for anymore. Didn't look at her, his eyes were still locked on the compound. "We go in quiet, precision only, no explosives unless absolutely necessary." And for the first time he looked at her not as a medic, but as something else. "Doc, you're identifying casualty treatment zones, ours and theirs. This just became a rescue for more than one kind of hostage." Maya nodded, her jaw tight. She was already calculating dosages for children, packing atropine for chemical exposure, picturing where inside the fortress she could treat the smallest and most fragile. But in the back of her mind, one truth kept echoing, quiet and cold. If they were using children as shields, no one inside that compound planned on leaving alive. The insertion began like choreography, controlled violence. Tank and Collins silenced the eastern sentries with blades. Smooth, silent, predators in motion. Santos and Williams breached the main entrance, Murphy on rear security. Every second precise, clean, efficient. Until it was. The sniper's bullet came from 600 meters northeast, from a tower most of them hadn't even marked. Just a flicker of orange muzzle flash in the dark, and then Tank went down. The shot ripped through his shoulder, spinning him into the dirt with a sickening crack. "Sniper, sniper northeast," his voice cut through the comms. Maya was already moving, sprinting through dust and concrete spray as more rounds snapped overhead. Her body moved before thought, instincts forged long before the medic's insignia on her shoulder. Tank's breath came fast and shallow, his arm limp, blood pouring from a wound that pulsed with every heartbeat. The bullet had torn through his clavicle, shattering bone, slicing the subclavian artery. "Doc, I can't feel my arm." His voice cracked with fear, real fear, the kind that ignored rank and bravado. "You're fine," Maya said, tone calm even as the next bullet sparked inches from his head. "Numbness is swelling. I'll get you patched." She pressed hard, agents ready, bandage wrapping, her body a wall against incoming fire. But the math was brutal. Williams was down 30 meters away, leg hit, dragging himself with one arm while blood poured beneath him. Every time someone tried to move, the sniper's next round drove them back. One by one, the team was being pinned. And there at Tank's side lay his rifle, the M110. The long barrel gleamed in the faint light. Maya's eyes locked on it. The rifle she'd trained on, competed with, mastered in a life she had buried years ago. "Give me the rifle," she said. Tank's eyes widened. "Doc, that's a 600-meter shot, in combat. Even I wouldn't take that right now." Maya's hands were already on it, checking chamber, scope, magazine. Her body moved with the old rhythm, the muscle memory she thought she'd left behind. "What the hell are you doing?" hissed, disbelief cutting his voice. She lay prone, rifle snug into her shoulder, breathing slowed, world narrowing. Through the scope the tower came into focus. Stone walls, narrow window, barrel gleaming faintly, and behind it the faint outline of a face. Young, focused, deadly. She hesitated for one breath, because this wasn't paper, not a target, a human. Then Williams groaned in pain, and the decision was made. "I can see him," she whispered. "He's lining up on you, Commander." Froze, he understood. She was about to choose between her past and their lives. The wind was light, 3 to 5, angle slightly upward, rifle zeroed for Tank, not her. Adjust, compensate, trust the math. Her heartbeat slowed, 1-2, the world went quiet. She squeezed. The recoil slammed her shoulder, vision blanked with the muzzle flash. For a moment, nothing. Then the window went still, no more muzzle flicker, silence across the valley. 600 meters away, the threat was gone. Maya lowered the rifle, turned immediately back to Tank. Her hands bloody again, but this time with medicine, not math. "Lucky shot," she said quietly. But her voice carried a tremor, the kind that meant even she knew it was no accident. The silence that followed was heavier than the shot itself. Why did silence feel heavier than bullets? The rifle still rested across the dirt, the faint warmth of its barrel mixing with the smell of cordite. For several seconds after Maya pulled the trigger, nobody moved. Not the SEALs pinned in rubble, not with his jaw tight and eyes unreadable. Not Tank, his blood still seeping beneath the fresh pressure bandage. Even the night itself seemed to pause, as though the valley held its breath. And then Williams groaned from 30 meters away, voice ragged with pain. The spell shattered. Maya was already up, medical kit in hand, sprinting across the kill zone where only moments before no one had dared to step. "Let me see," she said, pushing Williams' hands gently away from his wounded thigh. Blood soaked his fatigues, but her quick inspection found no shattered bone, no severed artery. Painful, disabling, but survivable. "You're going to be fine," she told him, bandaging with practiced speed. Her tone was matter-of-fact, stripped of comfort because she knew the truth. Men didn't cling to soft words in combat. They clung to certainty. Still, she could feel eyes burning into her back. When she finally looked up, the others had gathered in a loose semicircle, Tank leaning pale against the wall, shoulder immobilized. Santos crouched with rifle ready. Collins' knife stilled in his hand for once. Murphy scanning the perimeter, though his gaze kept flicking toward her. And standing rigid, watching with an intensity she'd rarely seen from him. "That wasn't luck," he said finally. His voice carried authority, but something underneath it too. Curiosity, suspicion, maybe even awe. 600 meters, unfamiliar weapon, combat conditions, and you put that round exactly where it needed to go. His eyes narrowed. "So I'll ask again, who the hell are you really?" Maya didn't answer immediately. She finished the bandage, checked circulation, pressed William's shoulder once to ground him. Then she sat back on her heels, her hands still blood-stained, her breath steady despite the adrenaline still thrumming in her chest. She had known this moment would come. From the second she touched Tank's rifle, it was inevitable. Some truths could not stay buried once acted upon. "Army marksmanship unit," she said quietly. Her voice was level, but her eyes didn't meet theirs. 3 years, national rifle champion, international medalist, then sniper school, top of my class. The words dropped like rounds chambered into silence. Santos let out a low whistle. Collins muttered, "Jesus Christ." Tank's eyes, sharp despite the pain, fixed on her like he was seeing her for the first time. His face didn't move, but the question came anyway. "So why a medic?" Maya's mask faltered just for a heartbeat. The hardness cracked and something raw bled through. "Because I got tired of taking lives," she said simply. Her tone was flat, but the weight behind it was a wound not yet healed. Collins leaned forward, almost incredulous. "But you just killed someone," Maya finished for him, voice quiet but steady. "Someone probably younger than me, someone who had a family, and I did it because the alternative was watching you die one by one." The silence returned, heavier than before. Not judgment this time, not skepticism, something else. Respect mixed with unease, because in Maya's words was a truth they all lived with but rarely admitted aloud. "How many?" asked finally. His voice was softer but still carried weight. She didn't look up from William's bandage. Her hands moved with clinical precision, even as her tone barely rose above a whisper. "Enough to know I never want to do it again." The compound loomed larger as the team pushed forward, its walls swallowing them whole. First floor clear, second floor looming. The stairwell was narrow, choked with dust. His fist went up, "Halt." And then they all heard it. A child's cry. Soft, fragile, impossible in this place. Every man froze, rifles lifted, eyes searching shadows. From the top of the stairs, movement. A man stepped into view, clenched in his right hand, and in his left, a girl. No older than 6. Her dark hair tangled, her face streaked with tears, her body pressed tight against his chest like a shield. The fighter's voice shook as he shouted in broken English, "Drop weapons, or the girl dies." The SEALs locked in. Santos had a line on the head, but too tight. Collins' angle was blocked. Even, usually decisive, hesitated. The risk was too great. The girl's wide eyes found Maya, terrified, pleading. Maya's voice crackled in his earpiece, soft, controlled. "I have the shot." His head snapped toward her. Across the stairwell, her carbine was steady, optic sight fixed. She found the gap, the 3 inches of empty space between the fighter's temple and the child's head. "Negative," whispered harshly, "too dangerous." But Maya was already moving. She dropped to one knee, breath steady, rifle unmoving despite the shaking stare beneath her. Through her optics she saw not just a man with a weapon, she saw his eyes. Young, afraid. His grip on the girl trembled, not with intent but with desperation. "Please," the fighter's voice cracked. "I don't want to hurt her, but I will." Maya's trigger squeezed once. The shot cracked sharp in the confined stairwell. The man dropped instantly, a neat hole centered between his eyes. The girl stumbled forward, freed. Santos lunged, catching her before she hit the ground. "Target down," Maya said into the silence, her voice even. Then softer, her hands trembling as she lowered the rifle, child secure. But inside, her chest ached, because even in victory, her trigger finger burned with memory, the old truth that every round carried more weight than steel. Room by room, the reality set in. An elderly woman, shivering in a closet. 2 teenagers barricaded in a bathroom, faces pale with fear. A mother clutching an infant so tightly the baby's cries were muffled against her chest. Every doorway revealed a new complication. civilians tangled with combatants, shields against the SEALs' precision. In one room, two armed fighters crouched behind a wounded man, using his broken body as cover while firing bursts into the hall. Maya acted before anyone else. Two precise rounds snapped through narrow gaps, cutting both down without so much as grazing their shield. Then she was at the man's side, weapon already holstered, hands pressing into his abdomen where blood pooled. Colin stared. How the hell? Angles and patience, Maya murmured, working without pause. Sometimes the only way to save a life is to take one. Around her, the SEALs moved with practiced precision, but their eyes flicked to her again and again, their silent calculation shifting. She wasn't just their medic anymore. She was something else, something they couldn't quite name. A guardian with a rifle, healer and executioner in one. And with every impossible shot, every life preserved through violence, the question pressed heavier against their minds. Who exactly had been sent here with them? The basement stairs swallowed them last, a tomb of concrete and shadow, reeking of damp and something darker. At the center of the room, chained to a chair, was CIA operative David. Maya's light swept across his body. Bruises, lacerations, swollen eye, and worse, his breath, shallow, wet, a sound she knew too well, a lung failing. She knelt fast, hands moving before thoughts could catch up, pulse weak, skin clammy, signs of internal bleeding, too much blood lost already. Jesus Christ, muttered behind her. His good eye cracked open, unfocused, darting weakly toward her. His lips moved. She leaned close. The package, his voice was a rasp. Chemical weapons shipment tomorrow night, sarin gas. Leaned in sharp. Where it moving? But's eye rolled back. His hand slipped from Maya's wrist. Her equipment shrieked with alarms, pulse dropping, shock seizing. He's bleeding internally, Maya barked, ripping open her surgical kit. Ruptured spleen or liver. If I don't operate here, he dies. His eyes flicked to his watch. Extraction window less than 10 minutes. His jaw clenched with the impossible choice. Leave the operative, lose intelligence that could save thousands. Stay and risk losing everyone. Stabilize him for transport, he said tightly. Maya's scalpel was already in her hand. Her voice was hard steel. If we move him, he'll be dead before the helicopter lifts. The building shook above them, dust raining down from explosions. The comms crackled with urgent calls from the team upstairs. Enemy reinforcements closing in. Ammunition running low. How long? Demanded, the strain breaking through his control. 20 minutes, Maya said. Her eyes never left her patient. 30 if there are complications. We don't have. Her gaze shot up, eyes blazing. Then you'd better hold the perimeter, Commander, because I'm not leaving him to die. Stared at her for a long moment, the storm of command decisions tearing across his face. Then he turned to his radio, voice flat with finality. All stations, this is actual. We're staying put. Establish perimeter. Extraction delayed indefinitely. Acknowledgements came back, strained but loyal. Looked back at her, voice low. Doc, you'd better be as good at surgery as you are at shooting. Maya didn't glance up, scalpel already cutting clean. Guess we're about to find out. How could a basement feel like a coffin before the lid was even closed? The concrete walls pressed in around them, the smell of dust and rust thick in every breath. The overhead pipes dripped steadily, a rhythm that mocked the chaos above. The firefight upstairs was muffled but constant, bursts of M4 fire answering cracks of AKs, grenades that rattled the very bones of the building. And in the middle of it all, on a blood-stained floor that had never been meant for medicine, Maya was cutting into a man's abdomen with a scalpel. Her gloves were already slick, her forearms painted in red. The beam of his flashlight shook slightly as he held it over her shoulder, casting jittering shadows across battered face. The CIA operative's breathing was shallow, every inhale rattling, every exhale threatening to be his last. Splenic laceration, Maya muttered under her breath, her tone clinical but tight. Grade 3, I can repair it. Clamp first, clamp first. His jaw worked, the tension in his silence louder than the gunfire above. How long, Doc? 5 minutes to stop the bleed, she answered, never lifting her eyes from the wound. 10 to close, 15 if he crashes. 15 minutes is a lifetime up there, said. Then make it 1, Maya shot back, her voice hard, her hands steady. For a moment the only sound was the wet rhythm of suction pulling blood, the careful snip of clamps locking onto vessels. And then, the sharp crack of an explosion upstairs. Dust rained from the ceiling. The flashlight beam shook. Comms came alive with desperate voices. Contact front, multiple tangos breaching north wall. We're down to last mags. Santos is hit, shrapnel in the leg. Swore under his breath, glancing toward the stairs. Duty pulled at him like a vice, his men bleeding and fighting above, the mission bleeding out below. Maya didn't look up. Go, she said firmly. They need you. His head snapped back toward her. And leave you here alone. Her hands kept working, clamp after clamp. I'll finish. You hold the line. That's the only way he survives and the only way your men survive too. For a heartbeat, hesitated. Then the commander in him won out. Don't die down here, he muttered. Then he was gone, boots pounding up the stairs, his rifle already raised. Maya didn't watch him go. She couldn't afford to. Her world had shrunk again, artery, clamp, suture. The rest could fall away. His pulse fluttered beneath her fingers, weak and erratic. Stay with me, she murmured, not sure if she was talking to him or herself. The firefight above intensified. Shouts, screams, the pop of grenades. Somewhere close, a wall gave way with a crash of concrete. The whole building trembled. Maya bent lower, shielding the wound from falling dust. Her breath came steady, measured. She had done this before, in tents, in trucks, in bombed-out ruins where sterile protocol was a fantasy. She had trained herself to be still in chaos, but never like this. Never while the ceiling shook with death. Almost there, she whispered, sliding the suture through, tying off with mechanical precision. Almost there, you don't get to quit yet. The heart monitor screeched, a sudden spike of panic. His vitals nosedived. No, she snapped, her hands moving fast, adrenaline sharpening every motion. No, 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 stay with me. She pressed deeper, found the vessel, clamped, tied, pressed again. The monitor steadied, weak but alive. Maya exhaled, sweat stinging her eyes. Her whole body trembled with effort, though her hands still moved like machines. She packed the wound, closed layer after layer, sutures pulling tight in the beam of shaking light. Upstairs, the battle grew closer. She could hear boots pounding, the shouts of her team mixing with guttural cries in another language. The fight wasn't on the walls anymore. It was in the halls. Her radio hissed, his voice breathless, tight. Doc, we're getting overrun. How much longer? 2 minutes, she barked back, even as her hands blurred with the final stitches. We don't have 2 minutes. Then make them, she snapped, her voice breaking like a whip. Another explosion shook the building, closer this time, so close her scalpel rattled against the tray. The stairwell thundered with approaching boots, enemy boots. Maya's chest seized, but her hands didn't. She drove the final suture closed, pressed the bandage in place, and taped it hard against the wound. Surgery done, she shouted, already ripping off her gloves, grabbing her kit. He's stable for transport. Her words cut off as the stairwell door slammed open. 2 fighters charged down, rifles raised. Appeared in the doorway like a wall of steel, his M4 roaring in the confined space. The first man dropped instantly, his chest erupting in red. The second stumbled as second burst tore him down. Maya barely flinched. Her hands were already lifting limp weight, blood soaking her uniform. Help me get him up. Slung his rifle, grabbed under shoulders. Together they hauled him, stumbling up the stairs into a first floor that had become a war zone. The corridor was smoke and fire. Tank crouched low against a wall, one arm limp, the other still firing bursts with stubborn fury. Collins dragged Santos behind cover, his leg bleeding badly. Murphy held the stairwell with single-shot precision, his magazines nearly empty. And then they saw Maya, and hauling the unconscious operative. "Package secure," barked into the comms. "Immediate extraction requested." The team's battered faces lit up despite the blood, despite the exhaustion, because against every odd they had him. But the enemy wasn't done. Shadows moved in the smoke, more figures pressing in, their gunfire cutting across the hall. Maya dropped beside Santos, her hands already working his leg wound even as laid down suppressing fire. "You'll live," she muttered, pressing gauze, tying tight. Santos winced but managed a faint grin. "Thought you were just a medic, Doc," he rasped. "Surprise," she said flatly, sliding in a tourniquet, her rifle never far from reach. The firefight turned desperate. The team down the hall, covering one another in bursts, dragging the wounded, weight slowing every step. The extraction point lay beyond the compound walls, but between them and it, the courtyard, wide, exposed, a kill box. Swore under his breath, calculating, scanning. His men were bleeding, nearly dry on ammunition. Extraction bird was inbound but minutes away. "We can't hold here," Collins barked. "Then we don't," said, his eyes cut to Maya. "Doc, options." Her brain fired on instinct. Angles, lines of fire, cover points. Her eyes swept the courtyard through the shattered wall, the moonlight painting enemy positions like ghosts. She swallowed. "Precision, nothing else works, suppressive won't hold, we pick targets, every shot counts." "Can you?" started. But the way she leveled her rifle answered before he could finish. Tank gave a bloodied grin from the wall. "Hell, let her." Hesitated only a second. Then, "You're on overwatch, Doc, make it count." The door splintered open into the courtyard. Enemy fire erupted instantly, sparks cutting across the rubble. But Maya's rifle barked once, twice, 3 times. Each round precise, deliberate. 3 enemies dropped before the rest even understood where death had come from. The SEALs surged forward, Maya covering them, her shots cracking with surgical precision. Every time a muzzle flash lit the dark, she answered with silence. Every time a fighter pressed too close, she carved the way open. And through it all, voice carried over comms, steady, commanding. "Move, package to LZ." By the time the helicopter thundered overhead, the team was half crawling, half dragging themselves across the courtyard. Bullets still snapped, but fewer now. Maya's rifle had thinned the storm. The Black Hawk hovered, rope lines unfurling, its door gunners spitting fire into the compound's edges. One by one, the SEALs clipped in, hauling wounded and aboard. Maya shoved Santos up with Tank, then Williams, Collins last. Then turned to her, "Go." She shook her head, "You first." For a second his jaw tightened, then he clipped in, rising fast. Maya slung her kit, clipped her harness, and rose into the night, bullets still tearing through the air below. The Black Hawk lifted, the compound shrank, fire still burned, but the team was alive. And stable for now. Maya sagged against the cabin wall, her arms shaking at last. Her rifle lay across her knees, her gloves still soaked in blood. The men sat in silence, battered, bandaged, staring at her in a way they hadn't before. Not just as their medic. Not just as someone who could shoot. But as both. And in their silence was a truth she wasn't ready to face. That they now needed her as more than she had ever wanted to be. Why did silence in the helicopter feel louder than the firefight they'd just survived? The Black Hawk thumped through the night, its rotors carving the darkness into rhythm. Inside, the cabin was dim and heavy with exhaustion. The air stank of sweat, cordite, and blood, so much blood. The wounded groaned softly, bandages dark and wet. Maya sat with her back against the fuselage, her kit spread across her knees, hands working even though her body begged for rest. Lay stretched out on the deck beside her, his face pale, lips parted in shallow breaths. Every few seconds she checked his vitals, adjusted the IV, pressed a hand against the bandage on his abdomen as though to remind herself he was still there. The others sat in silence. Tank pale but stubbornly upright, one hand clamped to his immobilized shoulder. Williams drifting in and out, leg bandaged tight. Santos grimacing through shrapnel pain but still managing to keep one hand on his rifle. Collins and Murphy quiet, watchful, their rifles across their laps as though the fight hadn't truly ended. And he hadn't taken his eyes off her once. She ignored it or tried to, focused on his pulse, on the rhythm of sutures she had already closed, on anything but the way the men now looked at her. They had seen too much, and not just the blood and the precision shots. They had seen her. For the first time she felt stripped bare, not by shrapnel or interrogation, but by truth. Stirred suddenly, groaning, his eyes flickering half open, Maya leaned close. "You're safe," she murmured. "Stay still." His hand twitched, found her wrist. His voice rasped, broken but urgent. "The package." Leaned in instantly, his voice sharp. "Where it moving?" Coughed, a wet, choking sound that made Maya press harder on his bandage. His good eye locked on, desperate. "Tomorrow night, shipment of sarin enough to kill thousands. They're moving it by convoy." "Where?" demanded. Tried to answer, but his voice broke. His head rolled back. His pulse stuttered weakly beneath Maya's fingers. She hissed, adjusting the IV. "Don't push him, he's barely alive. If I don't keep pressure, none of this matters." Exhaled sharply, but didn't argue. His eyes were like iron, but even he knew Maya's hands were the only thing keeping their intelligence asset alive long enough to talk again. The helicopter pressed on. No one spoke after that. Only the steady thrum of the rotors, the faint beeping of monitors, the low hiss of breath between clenched teeth. And the unspoken truth that tomorrow, the real storm would begin. At forward operating base Sentinel, the wounded were whisked away as soon as wheels touched dirt. Medics rushed into the infirmary, their faces tight as they listened to Maya's rapid-fire report. She should have collapsed. Her body begged for it. But instead she followed, scrubbing her hands raw in the sink, then diving into the surgery bay to help. The field doctors gave her looks at first, questioning, wary. Then they saw the quality of her sutures, the way her clamps had been placed, the precision of her work in conditions that would have broken most surgeons. And the questions faded into silent respect. Hours later, Lay stabilized, sedated, alive. Barely. Maya stood outside the bay, her uniform stiff with dried blood, her shoulders slumped. For once, she didn't feel the weight of duty pressing her forward, only the weight of what had already been done. The SEALs waited nearby, cleaned up as much as field showers allowed, patched and bandaged but still carrying the dust of the compound on their skin. They didn't speak at first, just watched her. Finally, Tank broke the silence. His voice was rough but steady. "You saved my life, Doc. Then you picked up my rifle and saved all of ours. That was luck." She shook her head. "It was necessity." Collins leaned forward, his expression sharp. "Don't give us that. You don't shoot like that unless you've lived behind a scope." Maya didn't answer. Her silence spoke more than any confession could. Stepped closer, his presence filling the hall. "You made a 600-meter shot under fire, then stitched a man's spleen in a basement while bullets came through the ceiling. That's not just necessity. That's something else." His eyes searched hers, but she didn't flinch, didn't break. "It's survival," she said flatly. "Yours, mine, his, that's all it ever is." For a moment no one spoke. Then Santos let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "Hell, I don't care what you call it. All I know is if I'm bleeding out again, I want you there. Rifle or scalpel doesn't matter." The others murmured agreement, faint but real. But Maya didn't feel pride. She didn't feel relief. only the weight of something old stirring in her chest, the sniper she had buried, clawing its way back to life. She turned away, whispering almost to herself, "I left that behind for a reason." The debriefing with command was short, brutal and cold. Stood beside her, his uniform crisp despite the exhaustion still etched in his face. Maya gave her medical report with professional detachment, each word precise, stripped of emotion. Wound counts, procedures performed, stabilization status. The commander across the table barely looked at her. His focus was on the package on the intel had whispered. Sarin gas, convoy, tomorrow night. Every detail was dissected, catalogued, pressed into strategy. And Maya, she might as well have been invisible. It shouldn't have bothered her. She preferred invisibility. It was safer, cleaner, easier to live with. But after everything, after blood and fire and silence that weighed heavier than shrapnel, to be dismissed again, burned in a place she didn't want to admit existed. When the meeting ended, lingered beside her. He didn't say anything at first, just studied her like he had in the helicopter, his gaze a puzzle she wasn't ready to solve. Finally, his voice was low, even. "They don't know what you are, not yet. Maybe they don't want to." She stared at him. "And what exactly am I, Commander?" His jaw worked, as though searching for words that didn't exist. Finally, he said only, "The reason we're still alive." Then he walked away. And for the first time in a long time, Maya felt completely untethered. Sleep didn't come. She lay in her cot, the canvas creaking with every restless turn. The bass hummed around her, distant engines, muffled radios, boots echoing in the corridors. Her hands still trembled faintly, though not from fatigue, from memory. The rifle pressed against her shoulder, the face in the scope, young, focused, human, and the way he had disappeared in silence the moment she squeezed. She pressed her palms to her eyes, but it didn't erase him. It never did. Every face she had ever dropped through a scope lived in the quiet of her mind. She had thought medicine would drown them out, that saving lives would balance the ledger. But tonight proved otherwise. Tonight proved the sniper had never really left. She had only locked her away. And now the SEALs had seen her, and there would be no putting that truth back in its box. At dawn the call came. Convoy confirmed, weapons shipment, sarin gas in transport. The mission had changed, no longer just a rescue, now an interdiction, and the SEALs would be going back out. Maya stood in the hangar as the team gathered, their gear freshly checked, their faces still carrying bruises and bandages from the night before. She shouldered her pack without a word, sliding into place among them. No one questioned it this time, no jokes, no smirks. Tank nodded once, grim respect in his eyes. Santos gave her a half-smile, faint but real. Collins muttered something under his breath that sounded almost like admiration. Even Williams, limping heavily, gave her a quiet clap on the shoulder. And he just looked at her for a long moment, then said, "This time, Doc, we go in knowing exactly who you are." Maya didn't answer. She only clipped her pack, checked her rifle, and followed them toward the waiting bird. Because deep down she knew, it wasn't about who she was anymore. It was about what she was willing to become. Why did the desert night feel louder before the first shot was even fired? The convoy's rumble carried across the sand long before headlights appeared. The ground trembled with heavy trucks, armored carriers, engines straining under weight they shouldn't have been hauling. Through her scope, Maya watched the silhouettes crest the rise, a line of steel and shadow cutting across the horizon. She lay prone on the ridge, the sand still warm beneath her chest, her rifle steady against her shoulder. Beside her, crouched low, binoculars raised, his voice a whisper over comms. "Count 7 trucks, front and rear gun vehicles, middle 3 are cargo." "Sarin," Maya murmured, her eye never left the convoy. "One shipment, maybe more, enough to kill thousands." The others shifted in the darkness around them. Tank sat propped against a rock, his wounded shoulder still bound, his jaw tight as he clutched his rifle with his good arm. Santos leaned against the dirt, legs stiff but steady. Williams limped from cover to cover, careful with his bandaged thigh. Every man wounded, every man still ready. And her, the medic who wasn't just a medic anymore. The plan was simple on paper. Interdict the convoy. Secure the chemical weapons before they crossed into territory where they'd vanish. Simple, but nothing in war was ever simple. Maya's finger rested near the trigger, not on it. Her breath slowed. Her heartbeat matched the pulse of the desert itself. She whispered more to herself than anyone, "Every shot has a cost." The ambush triggered with a thunderclap. A controlled detonation tore through the dirt road beneath the lead vehicle, flipping the armored truck onto its side in a fireball. Gunfire erupted instantly, tracers slicing the night. SEAL rifles answered, precise and brutal. Maya exhaled once. Her first shot dropped a gunner in the rear truck before he could swing his weapon into play. The second silenced a driver who tried to swerve out of formation. The third. Her finger froze. Through the scope she saw a cab door burst open. A fighter tumbled out, dragging someone small with him, a boy. 12, maybe 13. The child stumbled, terrified, shoved ahead of the man as a shield. Her breath caught. The boy's eyes met hers through the scope, wide, afraid, human. Her finger trembled just slightly. Doc barked from behind her, "Take the shot." She swallowed hard, the crosshairs locked between the man's temple and the child's head. Barely an inch of space. The same impossible math as the stairwell. For a split second, the sniper in her warred with the medic. The oath to save lives clashed with the reality that sometimes saving meant killing. Her voice cracked through comms, low and steady. "I have him." The rifle barked. The fighter dropped instantly. The boy froze, then bolted into the darkness. Maya exhaled slowly, forcing her finger to release the trigger. "Target down," she whispered, but her chest ached and her hands shook faintly for the first time all night. The battle spiraled into chaos. Gunfire stitched across the desert, bullets sparking against rock. The convoy broke formation, drivers panicked. One cargo truck swerved too hard, tipping onto its side, spilling crates that cracked open against the sand. White canisters rolled free, hissing faint vapor into the night air. Maya's stomach dropped. "Gas," she shouted, "masks on." The SEALs pulled masks in seconds, movements drilled and desperate. Maya fumbled hers into place, her eyes never leaving the spreading vapor. If the wind shifted, if the SEALs failed. She pushed it aside, no time. Through the smoke, a fighter stumbled, coughing, collapsing to his knees. His rifle dropped from nerveless hands. His body convulsed as the sarin took hold, nerve signals scrambled into chaos. Maya's medic instincts surged forward, drowning the sniper for a moment. She reached for her pack, adrenaline cutting through the fear. "I can stabilize him." His hand clamped down on her shoulder. "Doc, don't, we don't have time." Her eyes snapped to his, fury breaking through the calm mask. "He's a human being, he's dead already," cut in, voice hard. "We secure the shipment, or 1,000 kids like the one you just saved won't live long enough to breathe again. That's the math." Her throat tightened. She forced herself still, forced herself to listen to the part of her that hated him for being right. She lowered her pack, raised her rifle again, and became the thing she had sworn to bury. Minutes stretched like hours. One by one, the trucks were silenced. The fighters who hadn't fled lay in the sand, still and quiet. The only sound was the crackle of flames and the distant hiss of leaking gas. The SEALs moved with methodical precision, clearing vehicles, securing canisters, marking crates for extraction. Maya stayed prone, rifle still steady, covering angles no one else could. Every shadow was a threat. Every flicker of movement could be another man with another shield. But none came. When's voice finally cut through comms, it carried exhaustion and something heavier. All stations. Package secured. Repeat. Package secured. The men exhaled in unison, relief sharp and ragged. But Maya didn't. She lowered her rifle slowly, eyes still scanning the horizon. Her hands trembled just slightly, the echo of the boy's eyes still burning behind her own. Because for every canister they secured, for every life they saved, she knew the ledger of her soul had just grown darker. Back at the fob, the canisters were sealed, shipped under heavy guard, destined for disposal far from the reach of warlords and militants. The analysts would call the operation a success. Command would chalk it up as another box ticked, another Shadow War won. But Maya knew better. Success wasn't numbers on a report. Success was faces. The boy in the desert, the girl in the stairwell, the men on the ground who bled into her hands. And success carried a price. She sat alone in the medical tent that night, her rifle across her knees, her pack beside her. Her gloves were clean, her uniform washed, but her hands still felt stained. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them. The ones she couldn't save. The ones she had to kill to save others. The ones who would haunt her long after the medals and reports gathered dust. And the question that had driven her from the sniper's world to medicine years ago came roaring back with a vengeance. How many lives do you have to take before saving one no longer matters? She didn't have the answer. Not yet. The SEALs didn't look at her the way they had before, not dismissive now, not skeptical, but not easy either. Tank gave her a nod when she passed, a heavy acknowledgement that carried more weight than words. Santos muttered thanks in a voice still tight with pain. Collins avoided her eyes but lingered near, like proximity itself was respect. And always. He cornered her in the hangar 2 days later, his tone quiet but sharp. You saved that boy last night. She froze. What? I saw you, he said. His steel-gray eyes didn't waver. You hesitated, you almost didn't take the shot, but when you did, you spared him. She swallowed hard, throat dry. Does that matter? Everything matters, said. His voice carried a weight she hadn't expected. That's what makes you different from the rest of us. We don't hesitate, we can't, you do, and somehow that's what keeps you human. She stared at him, anger and gratitude warring in her chest. Hesitation gets people killed. Not last night, he countered. The silence stretched, neither broke. Finally, she turned away, shouldering her rifle. Don't mistake humanity for weakness, Commander. I don't, said quietly. I rely on it. That night she sat outside the tent under the desert stars, her rifle across her lap. The world was quiet for once. No tracers, no screams, no explosions, just whine through the sand. And she wondered if maybe was right. Maybe hesitation wasn't weakness. Maybe it was the only thing keeping her soul intact. But deep down she knew, sooner or later another choice would come, another impossible shot, another line she swore she'd never cross. And when it did, she wasn't sure who she'd be when the silence fell again. Why did the base feel louder in silence than it had in gunfire? Forward operating base sentinel had returned to its routine, engines rumbling, helicopters lifting, radios crackling, but for Maya, every sound carried echoes. The thump of rotor blades reminded her of shallow breaths in the Black Hawk. The slam of a door brought back the stairwell and a child's wide, terrified eyes. Even the scrape of boots across gravel sounded like bodies being dragged across rubble. She spent her days in the medical tent, patching Marines, contractors, and locals who came through the wire with burns, shrapnel wounds, infections, dehydration. She worked with the same steady hands, the same quiet tone, the same determination she'd always had. But the men saw her differently now. Other medics whispered when she walked past. They had heard the stories that she'd dropped insurgents from impossible distances, that she had cut a CIA operative open in a basement and pulled him back from the edge. The rumors grew with each telling, bending into legend. Sometimes she caught their stares, admiration mixed with unease. They didn't know whether to thank her or fear her. And in the silence of night, when the desert winds howled against the tent walls, Maya found herself asking the same question. What exactly had she become? Its recovery was slow but steady. The field surgeons credited her quick intervention with his survival. Without her clamp, her sutures, her defiance in that basement, he'd have bled out long before the helicopter touched down. When he was finally strong enough to sit up, he asked for her. Maya entered the infirmary reluctantly, her boots quiet against the steel floor. Sat propped against pillows, his face still pale, his body a patchwork of healing bruises. His good eye found her instantly. "You're the one who saved me." His voice was a rasp, but there was clarity in it. She shook her head. "The team saved you, I just stopped the bleeding." He studied her, the faintest smile touching his lips. "That's not what says." Maya felt her jaw tighten. "Exaggerates." His gaze sharpened, voice dropping low. "Doesn't exaggerate, and neither do I. You didn't just stop the bleeding. You held the line when the rest of us would have broken." She shifted uncomfortably, her hand flexing against her thigh. Praise sat heavy on her shoulders, heavier than criticism ever had. His expression sobered. "What you did out there, that wasn't just medicine. That was something else, something the rest of us don't understand." She cut him off, her voice firm. "Don't make me into something I'm not." For a moment silence hung between them, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But when the time comes again, and it will, don't pretend you can hide it." His words followed her out of the infirmary like a shadow. Command summoned her the next morning. She stood in the operations room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, maps and screens glowing with shifting intelligence. Was already there, his posture rigid, his eyes cool. The colonel across the table flipped through a file, his tone flat. "Specialist, your actions on the recovery are under review." Maya's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. The colonel continued. "You exceeded your role. You operated surgically under hostile fire. You demonstrated sniper proficiency beyond documented training, and you directly altered the mission outcome." His eyes rose, pinning her. "Some would call that insubordination. Others would call it initiative. Which do you think it was?" Maya held his gaze. Her voice was steady, stripped of emotion. "It was survival, nothing more." The colonel leaned back, studying her. "Survival doesn't make a man put a round through a 6-inch gap at 600 meters, or a medic cut open a CIA operative in a basement without backup. Survival is luck. What you displayed was something else." His voice cut in, sharp but controlled. "With respect, sir, without this team doesn't come home. Without her doesn't talk. Without her, thousands die choking on sarin gas. Call it whatever you want, but don't call it insubordination." The colonel's jaw worked. He studied, then Maya, then the file again. Finally, he closed it with a snap. "Fine, she stays with the team. Effective immediately, she operates dual capacity, medic and marksman. Classified, need to know." Maya felt the words like a chain snapping shut. She didn't want the role, didn't want the title, but refusing wasn't an option. She gave a short nod, her voice low. "Understood." Training changed after that. The SEALs invited her onto the range, into drills, into scenarios where her rifle spoke louder than her scalpel. At first, she resisted, clinging to the medic's bag as though it could shield her from what they wanted her to become. But pushed, Collins taunted, Santos encouraged with quiet nods, Tank offered grins that carried pain but also respect. And slowly, reluctantly, Maya's hands found the rhythm again. The weight of the rifle no longer foreign, the scope no longer a stranger. Her breath matched the crosshairs, her heartbeat matched the trigger. And every time a round snapped into a distant target, the SEALs exchanged glances, not of surprise anymore, but of certainty. Maya hated the certainty. At night the past returned. She saw the faces of those she had dropped years before, the ones she had tried to bury under gauze and morphine. She heard the echo of the oath she had taken in medical school, the words about first doing no harm. And she felt the weight of words in the desert. That's what keeps you human. But what if it wasn't humanity at all? What if it was weakness? She didn't know anymore. Some nights, she lay awake listening to the sounds of the bass, asking herself a question she could never answer. What would she be when this was all over? A medic who killed, a sniper who healed, or nothing at all? The next mission came faster than anyone wanted. Intel confirmed a cell regrouping, survivors from the convoy attack. They were planning retaliation, suicide bombers aimed at a crowded market. Time was short. The SEALs geared up, checking weapons and packs. Gave the briefing with crisp precision, his eyes sweeping across the team. When they landed, the city would already be moving. Civilians in every street, targets hidden among them. It would take precision, discipline, and luck. Maya listened quietly, her rifle across her knees, her medic's pack already strapped tight. No one questioned her presence this time. No one doubted. And that somehow terrified her more than anything else. That night, she sat alone on the edge of the airstrip, watching the runway lights flicker against the dark horizon. Her hands rested on her knees, the rifle leaned against her shoulder, the pack sat at her side. Two halves of her soul, waiting to be chosen. And she wondered if maybe, just maybe, the choice had already been made. Why did the city sound like peace, hiding a heartbeat of war? The market stretched across narrow streets, stalls spilling with fruit, fabric, spices, children weaving through with laughter. The smell of bread and smoke filled the air, masking the tension beneath. To any passerby, it was just another morning. But Maya knew better. The SEAL team moved like shadows through the crowd, civilian clothes hiding armor and weapons beneath loose layers. His voice whispered in her earpiece. Targets are here, 2 confirmed, vests under jackets, suicide mission. Her stomach tightened. She adjusted the strap of her pack, her other hand brushing against the hidden rifle she carried broken down in parts. Around her, families bartered over apples, a man shouted prices for scarves, a little girl giggled as she tugged her mother's sleeve. All of them had no idea death was walking only yards away. Maya's eyes scanned, and then she saw him. The first bomber, young, barely more than a boy. His eyes darted, his stride uneven, his hand clenched too tightly at his side. Beneath his jacket, the faintest bulge. Her pulse pounded, she whispered into comms. Visual on 1 moving north aisle. Confirmed, his voice answered. Take him if you get a shot. Her jaw clenched. A shot meant chaos. Panic, collateral, civilians screaming, running, crushed. But hesitation meant bodies in pieces. Her fingers trembled against the grip hidden in her sleeve. Her medic's oath screamed against the sniper's instinct. And then her eyes found the second. Across the market, older, steadier. His stride was sure, his gaze locked forward. A man who had already made peace with death. He moved toward a cluster of children playing near a fruit stand. Maya's chest seized. She had no line of sight, no way to intercept both. Her voice cracked in comms, urgent. 2 confirmed. We won't stop them both in time. His reply came fast, sharp. You've got 10 seconds, pick one. The world slowed. 10 seconds. The first bomber's hand twitched near his chest. The second stepped closer to the children. 9. Her eyes darted between them. Her lungs felt crushed. 8. Her oath screamed again, do no harm. Save life, every life. 7. But the sniper whispered back, you can't save them all. Not here, not now. 6. Her hand moved almost on its own, assembling the rifle from its hidden parts with practiced speed. 5. She dropped to one knee behind a vendor's stall, ignoring the merchant's startled gasp. 4. Scope aligned, crosshairs steady. 3. The boy's eyes locked with hers, the younger bomber trembling, terrified. 2. The man bent low, reaching for the children. 1. Her finger squeezed. The older bomber dropped instantly, the rifle's crack echoing through the market. His vest detonator fell from limp fingers as he collapsed in the dust. Screams erupted, the crowd surged, people ran in every direction, shouting, shoving. But in the chaos, the younger bomber froze. His wide eyes darted from the fallen man to Maya's scope, still locked on him. His lips trembled, his chest heaved, and then slowly his hands rose into the air. Maya exhaled a shuddering breath. "Second target surrendered," she whispered. His voice crackled in her ear, relief hidden under command steel. "Secure him. Move the team, now." The market cleared in minutes. Civilians fled, soldiers swarmed. The children were pulled into their mothers' arms, still sobbing but alive. The younger bomber was dragged away, his vest disarmed, his tears streaking through dust. Maya didn't look at him. Couldn't. Her rifle hung heavy in her hands, the weight of it dragging her down more than the pack ever had. The SEALs regrouped in a narrow alley, faces pale, bodies taut with the adrenaline that never quite fades. Tank broke the silence first, his voice low. "You saved them, Doc, those kids, the whole damn market." Maya shook her head. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I killed one to save many. I don't know if that's saving, or just choosing who gets to live." Santos leaned against the wall, his face lined but steady. "That's war. None of us get to choose clean, only necessary." Collins muttered agreement, though his eyes never quite met hers. Stepped closer, his voice even, calm but edged with something deeper. "You made the hardest call, and you made it right. Don't let anyone, not even yourself, tell you otherwise." She searched his face, looking for judgment, for doubt, for anything to ease the weight in her chest. But all she saw was truth. And that somehow hurt more than anything else. That night the city burned quiet fires in the distance. The market shuddered under heavy guard. The SEALs rested in their gear stacked, their bodies finally slumping into exhaustion. Maya sat apart, her rifle across her knees, her medic's kit at her side. Two halves of her identity staring back at her in silence. Her hands trembled faintly as she ran them over the rifle's cold steel. The scope gleamed in the dim light, and she remembered the boy's eyes, the one she spared, terrified, human, alive. And she remembered the man's face, the one she didn't. The sniper whispered that she had done her job. The medic whispered that she had failed. And in the quiet, she finally understood the truth. Maybe she was both. Maybe she would always be both. And maybe that was the only way she could keep walking this line, by carrying both burdens at once. At dawn found her still awake, still sitting with the rifle and the pack. He didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway watching her. Finally his voice was low, steady. "You know what I think?" She didn't look up. "What's that?" "I think you're proof that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's just the silence between breaths, the choice to act when no one else can, and the weight you carry after." She swallowed hard, her throat tight. "That weight doesn't go away." "No," agreed softly. "It doesn't, but maybe that's the point." She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time saw not just a commander, but a man who carried his own ghosts. And in that moment, she realized they weren't so different after all. The mission reports would call it a success. Intelligence foiled, civilians saved, 2 bombers stopped. But Maya knew better. Success wasn't measured in numbers. It was measured in lives spared, in lives lost, in the weight of choices that never left. As the helicopter lifted them from the city, the market shrinking below, Maya sat in silence, her eyes on the horizon. The desert stretched endless, unforgiving. And she knew that no report, no medal, no recognition would ever capture what it meant to stand in that market. Scope pressed to her eye, and decide who lived and who died. She had chosen, she had acted, and now she would carry it. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.